On this episode of Three Black Guys with the Mic, brought to you by our friends at Wendy's, we break down white supremacy. That's right, we help you understand white supremacy, what it is, and everything you need to know with racial justice attorney Lurie Daniel Favors. That and more on this episode of Three Black Guys with the Mic.
First of all, let me tell you something. Lamont is just full of
Sometimes my mama said, you know, when you don't have nothing nice to say, you should be quiet.
People say that Stephen A. is a coon. You agree with that? Everybody got quiet on that one? Okay, go ahead.
Rudy Giuliani practices voodoo. So he put a voodoo hex on my girl, Hillary, and that's why she got woozy. And the Secret Service had to prop her up and put her in the van.
But take us to a break, my dude.
It was voodoo, son.
I don't know about that voodoo.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is Three Black Guys with a Mic. It's Black History Month, and this month we want to highlight those who have achieved in Black history. We salute Albert King, NBA basketball great and Wendy's franchise owner. Albert King has played for the Washington Bullets, San Antonio Spurs, and the Philadelphia 76ers. In 1981, Albert King was picked 10th overall in the first round to the New Jersey Nets. But Albert didn't stop at basketball. Albert continues to score big in the business world with Wendy's. That's right, Albert King is one of the only African-American men to own a Wendy's franchise. Name and statistics aside, no one gave Albert any restaurants. He earned them, owning 3 Wendy's full-service restaurants in the New Jersey area. For Black History Month, we salute Albert King, NBA basketball legend and Wendy's franchise owner. Now, let's start the show.
Oh, let me tell you something. I'm sitting up here reading how last quarter Netflix worldwide subscription have been going what they call north. And it's like people around the world are saying, Monique, who? And I think sometimes Black people, we just think that we live in this little bubble.
In my Netflix subscription over Monique.
hell no. I ain't boycotting nothing over no damn Monique. Look, what's Stevie Dick when he say in what's the movie called? What he say? I'm about to get some more of my money.
Matter of fact, I'm about to get a premium subscription.
I'm about to get a premium subscription out here. I went into all my devices. Monique, ain't nobody checking for you.
Yeah, but that still is foul though. 13 million to 500,000. That's a big gap.
But
she's not.
Come on. Let's give
Monique.
Monique.
Hold on. Let's see. Right now, let's be honest. Amy Schumer.
Be honest. She is white. Monique is Black. That's how this works, bro.
If she would listen, if put it like this, if they went to Tig Notaro, who's a gay white female comedian who's just had an HBO special, they probably would only offer her about $2 million. But she's hot. She just had an HBO special.
How much money do you think Tiffany Haddish would get right now? You think Tiffany Haddish should get $2 million from Netflix?
No,
yeah, because that's still pennies. Because you know what she's not talking about because she's scared. She didn't talk about how much Jerry Seinfeld got.
You ain't gonna get on Jerry. Jerry Seinfeld is
Letterman. Ain't nobody getting on that level.
Wait. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Dave Chappelle's getting that, but Dave Chappelle's getting that Jerry Seinfeld check.
Stop.
No.
He got $20 million.
He got
Jerry
$20 million for 3.
For
but
3.
Jerry Seinfeld got $100 million. So did David Letterman.
He got 100.
He got 100 for what?
For just his coffees and good cars and all that other
shit.
Yeah,
coffee and toasted.
Right.
Yeah.
How many
David,
but that's like 50 damn episodes or some shit.
What's the boy's name? God dang it. What's Adam Sandler? Shoot, they just gave him a mint. They were saying
all right, fine. All right, so let's look at it for what it's worth.
No. Spud. You see where he dropped the ball? He was like, all right, fine. It's not no all right, fine. No,
let's look at it for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Amy Schumer, just for instance, and I ain't saying that she's funny. I watched her, whatever. She has, in the past, 10 years, had like 3 specials. She just had that movie like 2 years back that LeBron James executive produced. Trainwreck. And Amy, and then she was in some other movie where she was like the supporting actress, but she just basically starred in the film, right? She had her own Comedy Central joint, which, whatever. But let me ask you this. even in black movies, has Monique ever headlined a black movie? And I don't mean
Monique
like
got an Academy Award.
for
She got an
supporting
Academy
She got
Award.
Academy Award for what, Spud?
For
doing
Precious.
right.
Okay,
But
right.
she was.
But wait,
but
no,
the
no,
question is
Maynard. Let Spud explain itself. What did she do in Precious? Tell me the imagery
It
that she.
doesn't matter of the imagery. She still got an
It's-
Academy Award.
matter.
Denzel Washington got an Academy Award for playing a gangster.
But the thing was, she got an Academy Award, but nobody went to go see Precious for Monique. What I'm saying is, you don't have to win Academy Awards to be a box office draw.
Yeah, but nobody
They-
went to go see Trainwreck for Amy Schumer. No, let me take that back.
Yes,
Nobody.
the
Yeah,
movie,
they did.
she was the star.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, you're right. Go back.
What do you mean,
Maynard, I didn't go see Precious. What do you mean? You said we didn't go see it for Monique. Who on this podcast went and took their hard-earned dollar to go see Precious?
I did. I like Lee Daniels.
Spud, don't tell me that.
Lenny Kravitz.
Lenny Kravitz.
Lenny
What does he
Kravitz
got
was
to do with
in.
this?
He was in Precious.
Okay, all right. So anyhow, the idea. I didn't know he was.
I know that didn't make no sense at all.
The idea is this: she was in the movie Hair Show, where she probably was. That was the closest that she had ever been to being the #1 lead actress, and that movie was like straight to DVD. Nobody went to go. Monique is not she's not a draw by her. She's not. Now, when they did them Queens of Comedy joints, yeah, everybody was like, okay, Monique is going to be funny. But if Monique came in town in concert by herself, would you give, this is Lamont's question. Would you give her, you got $12. You going to buy her ticket or you going to buy a sandwich?
You know what's sad? Is on Saturday, she was in Jersey at this comedy club called Levity. And I was like, you know what? We ain't got nothing to do. Let me see what this ticket costs. She wanted $90.
I can't, not for no Monique.
She got 90. Now, you got 2 drinks with your 90, but she wanted $90.
No, that 2 drinks still ain't enough, Monique.
Miss Favors.
Hello.
Mrs.
How are
Favors.
you, sir?
Excellent.
Yes, sir.
This is Maynard. I have on the phone with us Spud and Lamont.
Hi.
So, how are you?
I'm great. How are y'all?
Excellent. So I don't know if you know how we kind of, got anxious to speak with you, but we've interviewed El Joy a few times, and
Yes.
we realized that you guys are on Sunday Civics. You and June kind of filled in with her, and we wanted to make sure that we would A, be equitable, and B, try to get, we wanted to build as many extra shows as possible. I'm sorry
what's
that
always amazing, Lamont, is when we have like a female guest on, it's like his whole
demeanor changes,
it totally changes. Like his,
And I was saying the same thing. Like, why is he so?
equitable?
Yeah, I'm
Lurie,
trying to Google that. Like,
35 seconds before we called you, you should have heard his mouth talking about another female.
exactly?
Totally different. Equitable.
I'm so glad I missed all of that. That's wonderful. I came in right on time.
Yes, you did. Equitable. That's the word of the day. Let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 3 Black Guys with the Mic. Spud is here, Lamont is here, Maynard is here. We are honored to be joined by attorney. Do we call you attorney or esquire or lawyer, contributor, host, co-host of Sunday Civics, author? Lurie Favors is with us. How are you, Lurie? What do we call you?
Lurie is fine. We can dispense with the titles. Lurie Favors, Miss Favors. They're not Miss Favors. That makes me feel old. Lurie is fine.
So can you just real quick break down your background and what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So I am a racial justice attorney, which means that I spend my days dealing with issues looking at things as varied from racial violence and policing, voter rights and voter education, educational equity so that African descendant children are getting a culturally competent education. That's what I do in my day job. I'm the general counsel at the Center for Law and Social Justice, which is located at Medgar Evers College, and it is itself a 32-year-old racial justice law firm. I also am co-founder of Breaking the Cycle Consulting Services, which is an educational equity company that provides professional development and training for teachers on the connections between racial identity and academic success, or the lack thereof, depending on which group you're teaching. And I run Sankofa Community Empowerment, which is a nonprofit organization my colleagues and I co-founded many years ago when we were in college, that provides educational and leadership development training for African descendant community groups. So depending on the day, those are the three main areas where my energy goes. So,
pretty long resume. It's a pretty long resume.
Well, you know what, Spud? No, wait a minute. Before you get started, I was going to say, does she sleep? Like, how does that work? Because, your doctor says you should do at least 6 to 8 hours per day, per night, afternoon, whatever it is. But with that resume, gentlemen, I don't know if she gets enough sleep, man.
That's hilarious.
I've seen your picture. You're only like 29. How'd you do all of this?
I'm actually 6. I'm 6 years old. No. Listen, they say black don't crack for a reason. I am a proud member of Generation X, even though I am usually mistaken for a millennial. Much love for my millennial brothers and sisters. So yeah, black don't crack, and we're going to hope it keeps going that way.
So we are dealing right now, or we are living in a time of of the government being shut down in the first year of Trump, and then then reopened and all this, and it's all the Democrats said that they're going to die on this hill called DACA. The Republicans ain't going to give this. The Democrats ain't going to do that. Can you tell us a little bit about how the DACA debate? Can you share something on that?
Yeah, DACA is sort of, I feel like it's what happens when major decisions about leadership are not addressed for years and years and years, and then they just sort of pile up until they can't be piled up anymore. So DACA is a program that was rolled out to benefit folks who are considered the dreamers. So a lot of times you hear these terms interchangeably, but they're actually two different groups of people. So the dreamers tend to be people, we tend to use that term when we're talking about people who are brought to this country through a variety of means, and crossing over a physical, border where a wall could block them is not usually one of them. Children who are brought over with their parents, if their parents are given a visa, perhaps they overstay the visa. For whatever reason, they are not technically in the country through a permissive, they don't have permission to actually be here. But they're here through no fault of their own. If you're 6 months old and you're brought here to wherever your parents bring you because they're searching for a better life, you grow up and you do the best you can with where you're at. It's not your fault. And so dreamers are people who are not here legally, but who are working towards, who were a part of a group that was working towards some legislative decisions in the early 2000s. There was an act called the DREAM Act. It never was passed through Congress, but the term stuck. Now, DACA is a program that was sort of created to fix this problem of long-term folks who have been here. If you're here from 6 months and you're 22 years old, you can't get access to financial aid for college. You're not going to have papers that are going to allow you to work legally, lawfully. And so you're kind of forced to exist in the margins of society. And so DACA was a program that came out under the Obama administration. And it was basically a program that said, listen, we don't have a permanent solution to Congress because, as y'all remember, under Barack Obama, Congress was doing nothing that man wanted to do. And so this was sort of like a Band-Aid over the situation. So people who applied for DACA, it basically gave them a 2-year permit to kind of be legal and to be above ground and to not have to just, sort of stay in the shadows. It was very controversial when it came out. I have a lot of immigrants in my family, and I was not a fan of DACA because it was in the back of my mind, if I tell my family members to provide all this information, where they're located, anything that the government would need to find them, and then something happens to DACA, we're going to be in a situation where everyone who I care so much about is going to have a target on their back. And that's unfortunately the position a lot of our folks find themselves in now.
Which always to me was odd that the Republicans fought Barack Obama so hard, because he was saying, hey, I'm gonna go get all their phone numbers. I'm gonna go get their addresses.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't the Republicans be like, oh yeah, let's do that? Because that's what they wanted anyway. They wanted to have a registry so they can round them up.
Which they're doing right now. That's right.
Right. So, and as the debate gets framed, we're talking about the numbers are often discussed in 800,000 to maybe 1 million dreamers. Is that kind of right? Or
Well, there are way more dreamers than there are DACA recipients. I think there are just under a million or just around 1 million DACA recipients. These are people who actually went forward, filed the application, got the permit, and who are now sort of living in this weird limbo where if you're losing your DACA, you've given the government all this information and now you no longer have the protection of the permit. But the dreamers, undocumented people, we're in millions of people who are here who don't have legal status. And so, these two groups, while, DACA recipients are a part of the broader dreamer community, both of these groups need attention, and both of these groups need to have legislation put forward that's going to address the fact that they are here, that they are a viable part of our community, our economy. And you're simply not going to, or at least I should say, well, I hope there's not plans to simply round up people on buses and literally take them to the border. But quite frankly, considering what we've seen over the past year, I would not be surprised if something like that were to be taking place if it's not already.
Well, Lurie, let me ask you this question. Do you think that this is a new form or new, age of racism against brown people? In Detroit, where I live, in Lincoln Park, one of the guys, George Garcia, lived in America for 30 years, since the age of 10, his family paid taxes, worked, so forth and so on. They deported him. So now they have taken the father out of the household. His family is here. He has, even in Michigan as well, another person, a doctor, they're deporting him back to Polish or wherever, I don't know where it is. These people they don't know their families. They didn't grow up in these Mexican, areas or so forth and so on. Is this what the new form of racism looks like?
I wouldn't call it new. I would just say it's evolved. This is white supremacy, on steroids. White supremacy was kind of shoved into the closet. When I say white supremacy, I don't mean like your individual feelings as a white person. I'm talking about a system that was explicit, or that is explicit, about funneling resources towards white people and away from non-white people. And this is really, right now, white supremacy is having a heyday because it is, the president has normalized it, has said it's okay to carry your tiki torches with no hoods on, and as allowing people not just to have personally racist feelings, but to then hire those people into positions in government where they are able to to really create policy based on their racist feelings. So what we're seeing is really, I think, what people would have been doing for the past, 53, 55 years that we've had integration if they could. But, now that it's okay to be openly racist again, they're able to really act in ways that social sensibilities, for lack of a better word, would have kept hidden in years past. But we're in a whole new ballgame right now.
So can you break down, if you can, let's break down, because I read your blog and I also saw your Periscope talk, which was fantastic. And the way that you broke down, white supremacy, what it is, and basically how people need to understand it. Because we have several conservative listeners, that basically say that we're the racist here. And what we always are trying to do.
We're three races.
Right. So what we always try to do is try to allow for people to understand, from an African-American perspective, what we are saying. And so maybe you can articulate what white supremacy really is and how it affects black, people in America or worldwide.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really good question, because we're now using terms that we haven't had to use for a long time. And so it's sort of raising up issues that for a lot of people, especially, people in younger generations, may not necessarily be as familiar with. So at its core, white supremacy is really two beliefs sort of packaged into one. The first is that whiteness and anything associated with it is superior, and that blackness and anything associated with it is inferior. That's sort of one compounded belief. And then the second portion is that because they are superior, as the belief goes, white people should dominate society and have access to the best of society, and should be able to use their power to ensure that non-white people do not have access. White supremacy is a very recent concept in terms of the human clock. I had a professor in college who said, if humanity was spread out on a clock, not a digital clock, but like an analog clock with numbers in hands, white supremacy would make up maybe 5 minutes of the whole calendar of humanity. because we really don't see this in existence prior to the creation of slavery. And slavery was a system where it was, and people often say, it's not racism, it's class. Well, no, in America and throughout, Latin America and whether that's Spanish or Portuguese, colonized countries, white people made a system that said they were going to have their entire economy based on free labor. And because the entire economy is going to be based on free labor, they needed some things in place to ensure that they had some stability with this system. And so one of the clear markers for being able to say who could have access to resources and who didn't was what you look like. And if you look Black and you are in a country or a continent that I am kidnapping people from and bringing them here, I want to not just have slaves, but I want to have slaves for life because, again, my entire economy is based on free labor. So I have to create a system that's going to support that. And that was where we see the introduction of ideas like racism, like white people are more beautiful, white people are more intelligent, white people have more capacity for greatness. Black people are primitive, they're pagan, they're, of the devil, they come from a dark continent. And so really, prior to the introduction of race-based slavery, which was, designed to be for life, like we weren't supposed to be having this free conversation we have right now. There was no plan to end slavery. So that white supremacy was the philosophy that system was based on. And it really helped white people sleep better at night. It's hard to, rape and kill and pillage if I think I'm raping and killing and pillaging a human. If I'm raping, killing, and pillaging an animal the same way I would, maybe kill an ox or kill a cow, then it's not quite the moral dilemma that it might be otherwise. So it's an idea that we base the system around.
Wait a minute.
We're gonna get some hate mail around this.
No, and that's what I'm saying, man.
I'm sorry.
It's coming. So here's my question, because you hit a lot of points that we talk a lot about on this podcast. Yeah. And one of the things that I say with a lot of sarcasm is that Donald Trump is winning. And with everything that you just described, we have to be realistic. There is a segment of the population in this country that do believe that still to this day. Like you said, when we see what's going on with the DACA thing, it's just so many different levels. And we always talk about how, Donald is a liar. It's no other way of doing or saying it or trying to be political about it. He's going to not tell the truth. So my question is, and with you explaining that, history of something that I like to say, that the white man believes that his ice is colder, because he does. He thinks his ice is so much colder. And I don't know if this is still like a piggyback off what Spud was saying, but is this part of the long range plan to have some of us leave the country, but to also put us one step away from or back to slavery, and we talk about this all the time as well about the 13th Amendment, because technically slavery is not abolished. It has not been abolished. Because you are the attorney, I'm not. But from my, non-master degree having self, like Boehner, what I read in the 13th Amendment is
that
you
you have a master's degree with this long question you got.
No,
right.
But
I thought it was a question. Questions we have. And you punctuate that with a question mark, Lamont. So let's get it. 8 words in a question mark, please.
No. I gotta get my time here. Is this part of the plan, in your opinion, and or what do we do as layman Black men? Because yes, we have a lot of different ethnic people that listen to our podcast. I also found out we can't say female, so different men and women. That's a whole nother thing. You can't call people females anymore, but okay.
Good catch.
But, yes. Is this the plan? And what do we do about the plan? Because it seemed like to me that the plan is working from their perspective.
Yeah.
Did you get the question, Lurie?
I think I got something I can respond to. I got the point. So is it a plan or is it a system? I shy away from the use of the word plan because no one that I know in my personal life right now is actively engaged in going home and planning each night how they're going to keep the Black man down. Maybe. I'm assuming that. But it is a system, right? And so systems operate regardless of how, if it's a well-functioning system, it's going to operate regardless of how the individuals within that system personally think, right? So I have, a number of white friends who are wonderful, awesome people. I mean, I think they'd have to be in order to be my friend, because I demand a lot from my white friends in terms of just honesty and being able to have this conversation. So they're not actively planning to keep me down, but they are actively benefiting from a system that their ancestors put in place to continually drive benefits to them. So I don't know if it's a part of a plan, but it is a part of a system, and we have a system.
Okay. Now let me ask you this, and not to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
That's where we go here. But in order
that exactly was to cut her off. That's exactly what you did.
Maynard, let me get this. Let me have this. I need this.
I got a master's degree.
Let me get this. And I agree with you to a point of it is a system, but in order for the system to be created, did there not have to be a plan that was formulated?
Yes, absolutely. And the founding fathers did a great job of doing it. And we have been living out their wildest dreams ever since, except for the fact that, like you said, slavery isn't over. It did morph. And that was an obstacle I don't think that they first saw. But, you'd mentioned earlier in the first part of the question that some people believe in white supremacy and others don't. My question, my issue isn't whether some people believe it and others don't. My issue is enough people believe it and are able to act on their beliefs in positions of power such that the people who don't believe it are not a threat to them at this point in time. So if you are an anti-racist, that's wonderful, but we need you, we who are victimized by racism and white supremacy, need you to do a hell of a lot more to counter that racism, because what's happening right now is not a threat to white supremacy. And in fact, white supremacy, you said earlier, Trump is winning. In that regard, I would have to agree. There's certainly some wins that they're racking up that we are not talking about.
Whoa, wait a minute. Can we get a bomb? Can we get a DJ? Can we get a funk master? Can we get some atomic Kang Jong-un North Korean bomb, please?
Seriously, you know what?
Kang Jong-un. Who is Kang?
Did you not see what they did to James Franco when it comes to North Korea? Chill out with that. Lurie, this is my thing, right? And to piggyback to what Lamont is saying, when I look at what Jeff Sessions is doing, when I look at the tax bill, I know that it's not the same tax bill as, Ronald Reagan's, but I look at it from this perspective. And as a racial justice, lawyer, you can tell me if I'm, spot on or if I'm just way off. Piggybacking off Lamont. If you're looking at, the so-called, I'm going to give tax breaks to corporate America so that way, hopefully everything can trickle down, that whole thing backfired, with Ronald Reagan. And then when you look at what Jeff Sessions is doing, doubling down on marijuana, I just think, and then, Donald Trump trying to remove all of the dreamers, I think that it could be some sort of system that they are creating to say, we're going to move all of the immigrants out and we are going to bring back the, I guess, same analogy of what happened with the crack epidemic. And we're just going to use marijuana, in place of it. And we're just going to continue mass incarceration, with doubling down on this whole marijuana thing. Am I off and this is the same thing, or am I a little on there?
Okay, so Jeff Sessions is having a heyday in his career right now. He's getting dragged all over social media, yes, but all of his long-held goals for revitalizing racism are being met. He came into his position. They said they were going to no longer enforce consent decrees that govern the way police departments that had been proven to be abusive, particularly racially abusive. He said that he was no longer going to enforce consent decrees. They have brought back asset forfeiture, which means that when a police officer stops you on the street and happens to find, maybe you got $5,000 from your grandma, I never have personally, but say you had got maybe $500 from your grandma, whatever it is, and it's in the car, and they seize that because they think it might be used in a crime, and you can't get access to that back. Jeff Sessions has brought that back with a vengeance. Jeff Sessions has ended enforcement. The Justice Department, the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, is no longer enforcing anti-discrimination laws that protect Black people. They are instead looking at universities that may be guilty of discriminating against white people. Right now, Jeff Sessions, people who are racist in their core or who believe that there is something that they should be able to support about white supremacy, they're having a very good time right now. And we have to be clear as Black people or as people of color who don't have access to whiteness as a benefit. Right. we got to revive some conversations that we thought we might be done with, but we clearly are not.
Because I just
Sweet
say, look,
child.
I'm sorry, real quick, Maynard, because I always, and on my talk show, I always just say, look, I'm not saying this is the same tax bill, but I'm just saying we got to pay attention, especially, for young black men who are, with the whole, with the 3 strikes law and with Jeff Sessions trying to double down, this is only going to send, in my opinion, send more black men to jail. And
we got to be clear, there are black people in jail right now for marijuana-related crimes where white people are opening stores to sell marijuana to other white people, like right now.
Hello.
So, absolutely.
Hello.
So this is I want to kind of pivot back because I let these 2 other guys just talk so much. But I want to say, so, the Democrats have made a point to say that they were, we're going to go on this hill for DACA, and this is the hill we prepare to die on. And that's cool. I'm all about the dreamers. I'm all about, I'm all about all my black and brown brethren, right? My question is, have the Democrats ever sold out for us? Think about this for a second. We're talking about 800,000, 1 million people that DACA is going to help or adjust their status in some way, shape, or form. We give as a voting bloc 93, 94% of our voting power to the Democrats.
Yep.
When Joe Biden said, you know what, gay people should be able to get married, and this is stupid. Then Barack said, my thoughts have evolved on homosexual relationships and their ability to marry. If you, and Lamont was attest to this, if you say, I think that the Holocaust only killed 5,900,000 people instead of 6 million, 5 Jewish people will show up and shut you down.
Is there a question here, Maynard?
Shut up, boy.
I mean, you got some really good points.
Shut up, boy.
And you did not refer to my 44th president properly. His name is not Barack, but it's called B-Rock. So let's get it right.
Okay, all right. If in last year, if you are a man who halfway looked sideways at a woman in 1975, you got fired from your job and your companies. All these other people will never give the Democrats 97%, 93% of their voting power. But we do, and we get what?
We get what you get when you don't have an enforcement plan.
All we get is got y'all next time. We get the side chick dinner. Like, yo, thanks for letting me come by, but
seriously, the side chick dinner? You can come up with a better analogy.
Right, man. Come on now. We have company.
I'm going to sidestep the analogy because I think the point is very valid. Yet, I do have to say that I think other communities are getting access to concessions from political parties because other communities are organized and engaged with political parties in a way that our community is not. And they are organized and engaged around their issues even outside of the political party structure in a way that our community is not. Although that is, I think, changing. So when President Barack Obama was in office and the LGBT evolution or his thoughts about LGBT community were evolving, that's because the LGBT community was up in arms, active, and they were like, listen, we have this progressive man in office. We are going to come forward with an agenda. And if we don't get what we want, we're going to protest and we're going to be very loud and vocal about our needs. They got results. Same thing with the Dreamers. When Barack Obama was elected into office, you saw the Dreamers. Yes, they celebrated. Haha, yes, oh, wonderful. This is great. And then they were organized, both those who worked with political parties and those who organized in the streets and in grassroots. I would venture to say, and I know this is not a popular opinion, so I apologize to y'all in advance if you get some heat for this, but when President Barack Obama was in office and it came to Black issues, many of our community leadership said that they were going to protect him, that they did not want to press his hand, that they were going to, not call him out. And listen, when he was first inaugurated and he got out that car and was walking down the road with Michelle, I was like, get back in the car. You got to stay safe. So, I get the need to want to protect him, but I feel like many in the Black community organizing class spent the 8 years of the Obama administration being proud and in love with Black Camelot and not flexing our organizing muscles. And we atrophied. A lot of those muscles atrophied in many, many ways. And so we have a Democratic Party that has been enabled to take us for granted because there's no consequences when they don't.
I saw you on Karen Hunter the other day, or heard you, whatever, which one they taped it, and you were breaking down the census for 2020. Can you go over that again and the importance of, the census in 2020 and how that applies to the ghetto or communities of color? I should say. I don't want to take the word ghetto back, but communities of color.
That's yeah. So the census is often one of those things that, at least in my family or my community, it's like, I ain't filling out the census and let the man know all the information they're going to know about me. Okay, so I just want to know, I want to hold that thought out there, because a lot of us approach the census from a space of suspicion, as we should, because we are Black people and being suspicious often keeps us alive. But the census is how any country takes how they count people, right? So if the country is going to provide funding for people who are physically disabled or differently abled, they need to know how many people need wheelchairs and how many people need walkers. And if you're in a city where there's a large number of people who need wheelchairs and walkers, are the city streets going to have that little up ramp that will allow someone with a wheelchair to get up or not? Are they going to have bus routes for people who need special access to buses or not? And that's just one example. But if I'm going to be a government and I'm going to give out money to different groups to address different issues, I need to know how many people in my community need what type of help. So for the African descendant community, if you are in a school in an area that has overcrowded schools, there aren't enough teachers. If you are in a community where there's no libraries or the library hours are very, very short, there's not enough paid librarians. If you are in a community where there aren't enough hospitals, if you're in a community where there aren't enough post offices, or even if those things are there, there's not enough people working them, you're underserved. That has a lot to do with funding. And if I am the state of New York and I know that there are very poor, economically disempowered communities in a certain area of New York, I need to be able to send money there, but I need to know how much money I'm going to send. Every single decision I make is based on numbers. How many people need what kind of help and how much help do they need? All of that data is figured out through the census. And the census is a survey that's taken every 10 years. And it's the data that government uses to say, okay, East New York, if you were in New York, you're in an area of Brooklyn called East New York, they are very underserved with schools. If I take the census in 2020 and I realize that area needs more schools, I'm going to send them more money for schools. I'm going to send them more money for teachers. Or if no one from that community fills out the census and lets me know that they need more students or more schools and more teachers, I'm not sending them anything because I don't have data that says that I should. So the census is data that we need for roads, for highways, for potholes, for snow plows, for anything that government pays for. There are right now every year $675 billion with a B like boy. $675 billion every year is spent based on census data. So if you are a Black man, which I'm told that you are, then you have certain diseases that are highly prevalent in Black male communities. The Center for Disease Control is going to fund certain projects, programs, certain therapies, certain research to address those issues. But if no Black men are filling out the census to say, hey, prostate cancer is a thing for Black men, or hey, there's a whole large portion of Black men who live in this community who need XYZ health services. If I'm Centers for Disease Control, I don't know that you were there. I don't know that you have those needs. So your community is not going to get the money that you need for your health care. Now, if you're in a gentrifying community, what tends to happen is, our white brothers and sisters, they are overrepresented many times. If you have a 2-parent household and a college student and they're white, mom might fill out a survey, the spouse may fill out a survey, and the college student will fill out a survey. That's 3 surveys. But if you're in an underserved Black community or an African descendant community or a community of color, or you're an immigrant community where you're afraid of filling out that information, you're not going to have enough representation on your block, let alone in your household. So that white community is going to get overrepresented with their money, and the communities of color that don't fill out census are going to get less money than they should. So it's very boring mathematical stuff until you look up one day and you don't have a bus route to get you from your house to your job, or you look up one day and you don't have enough teachers for your classroom and you got 40 kids in a class because there's not enough funding for teachers because they didn't know that many students lived in your community.
So at the bottom line is we need to fill out the census.
Please. Because you're going to fill out this, if you don't fill out the census, even if you get a whole bunch of, representatives in office who are going to properly represent the Black community, they ain't going to have no money. So, you're going to put Black people in positions of power to represent you. But if you don't fill out the census, those representatives don't get access to the money they need to adequately represent you. And then it sort of creates this negative circle where we just stay underfunded and underserved.
So, if people were to Google Lurie Favors and look for images, tons, first of all, very beautiful young lady, but tons of pictures with natural hair show up. And you wrote a book. And I want you to share a little bit about your book, talking about basically the memoirs of a nappy-headed girl, and I'm sorry if I'm messing that up, but
no worries.
Memoirs of a nappy-headed Black girl. Before you answer that, can you break down what good hair is? Is there such thing as good hair?
Yes, there is. It's the hair that grows out of your body.
All of it's
we've
good.
been taught all of it's good. We have been taught, again, based on that system of white supremacy we mentioned earlier, that good hair is straight hair because that's the type of hair that white people tend to have. We have also been taught, because of white supremacy, that bad hair is very kinky, coily. I say nappy. I know that's a political term, and people don't really like it, but my hair is nappy. Like if you say curly, which I know a lot of natural women prefer, my hair is not curly. If you look at my hair, if you go to my website, afrostateofmind.com, you will see pictures where my hair is definitely not what you would consider curly. So I wrote the book, Afro State of Mind, Memories of a Nappy-Headed Black Girl, after a lot of soul searching and going through the process of going natural myself. I went natural when I was in college, which was before the natural hair movement took off. And so I was privileged to see what life is like when you're the only natural on a campus of a predominantly white institution. And then now, you have almost the opposite end of the spectrum where Black women are able to find, meetup groups, websites, YouTube videos, bloggers, all of whom are celebrating the beauty of African descendant hair. And so in my book, I tell the story of how I came to go natural. I talk a lot about, being a young Black girl and feeling like my hair did not match up and my skin complexion did not match up, even as a light-skinned Black woman, like what that meant. And so the book really deals with my experiences with natural hair and colorism, but I use that as an example for understanding what happened to Black people and how we got into the condition that we're in. So while, yes, the book does tell my story, it also uses my story as an example of the history, like from the shores of the continent till we got here, how we traversed through slavery, and what are the issues we're dealing with now as it pertains to the Black feminine aesthetic.
I noticed it's like so far we don't ever go into like the reality world, but it's been like a pretty big topic in regards to one of the cast members on Love and Hip Hop, where she was having, a debate with the producer in regards to her hair and not being able to wear her hair naturally and being confident about that. It's really a shame. And what is the conversation you have to young, especially Black girls, about wearing their hair natural, wearing it, just the way that it is? And is there a way to, I guess, remove the bundles? I'm not hating on the hair industry. I know that the Indians is getting their check. I'm not mad at them, but
what do you mean bundles? Bundles of money? What are you talking about, my brother?
No, I'm talking about 26-inch bundles, 36-inch bundles, Cardi B bundles is what we're talking about. We're not talking about,
you talking about the yaki?
Yes,
number 9 yak.
Peruvian
okay, cool.
hair,
okay.
Peruvian,
gotcha.
Malaysian.
Okay.
So. What do you say to young Black girls who are in the, I gotta have 36-inch bundles?
Yeah, I
don't want to wear my hair natural.
Right. Now that's a really good question. Because one of the main things I will tell young Black girls is that I'm not the hair police. So, you wear your hair how you see yourself. And I think that is your right. And, go with God on that. However, it is very important to know that for hundreds of thousands of years prior to slavery, Black women were not searching throughout the continent of Africa for a magical berry or a leaf or a tree or a bush that was going to make their hair turn straight. We had rituals. We had entire cultural elements built around celebrating the beauty of our hair. You could tell where someone was from, what their status in society was, what their role in the community, all through various hairstyles. It was a communication tool as well as a space for adornment. So it's important to know that we didn't start thinking anything was wrong with our hair until we were put on slave ships and enslaved for life and told that we didn't have whiteness or access to whiteness. And so that's why our hair was ugly. So I'm like, so long as you know that, then wear your hair how you want to wear it. But you got to know that prior to slavery, we didn't think we needed lighter skin to be beautiful. We didn't think we needed straighter hair to be beautiful. And I encouraged young Black women to really sit in the space of discomfort that raises and think about how those things guide our preferences and our choices. Whether or not to get rid of bundos, I personally have chosen to not wear my hair straight. Even though I'm natural, I don't straighten it because I know that I'm communicating something to young Black women. I have a daughter. I have a son and a daughter, and it's important to me that my son knows that Black women are beautiful the way God created them, and it's important for my daughter to know that she is beautiful the way God created her. I get it. I understand the struggle. I was there for a very long time. And even to this day, there are some moments that I'm like, ooh, I am so very natural and nappy in this moment. Is this really what I wanted to? It's an ongoing wrestling match because when you're addicted to white supremacy, it's like being a junkie. You got to daily, on a regular basis, sort of go through your 12 steps and release, that addiction. But it's really important to know that this is very new. Wanting white hair to be beautiful between slavery and colonization on the continent of Africa. Prior to that, we weren't having these conversations. And that says a lot about how much slavery and colonization still impact us today.
I want to ask. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make this statement because she's giving us a lot of information, but she's dropping some of these gems in there. And I got to go back for one of them. When she called B-Rock, did you call him the Black Camelot?
I did because
that was so fly. I just need you to know that did not run by me, and you called out my addiction to white. What did you call it? What did she say, Maynard? White supremacy. Would you say addiction to it?
Addiction to it. I in some of the circles I operate, we analogize white supremacy to like a drug that you are forcibly addicted to. And like any other junkie, if you have an addiction, there's some things you can't do anymore.
How do you know if you're addicted to white
supremacy?
Hold
on. Before we go there. So we've come to the point of the podcast, Lamont, where this has become an intervention. And we want to have... When you talk about your $95 lobster tails and steaks,
that's an addiction to white supremacy right there. That's
what I was asking, because the reality is that it's no secret. I enjoy having what some may call a spirit every now and again. Some may call it ooze, and if it's not of a certain
caliber,
I don't want it. So does that mean that I've been marketed to a certain kind of way, that I'm addicted to some sort of idea?
White supremacy. Yes, you're addicted to white supremacy.
You're addicted, Lamont, and we all love you in this space here.
Lurie, that might be a T-shirt. That might be a word. We might go on a partnership on some checks on some T-shirts right there.
But what I would say is this: any addiction is going to really screw you up if you don't have an addiction recovery program. Indeed. So that's where my nonprofit work, that's what we try to be in that space is the addiction recovery program. So if you are dealing with white supremacy or having to navigate it, you need a safe space. Just like I need Alcoholics Anonymous if I'm addicted to alcohol. There was a time when being addicted to alcohol was not considered a medical issue. It was you were a morally bereft person. We got some new knowledge. We understand alcoholism is a medical disease. And now we have Alcoholics Anonymous. There was a time when we thought white supremacy and racism, well, some people thought it was all up in our heads. Now we know it's a real thing. And scholars like Dr. Joy DeGruy, who look at post-traumatic slave syndrome and how we are still shaped and impacted by the decisions made in yesterday, she now has medicalized this for us. So, whether you're addicted to your fine wine or not, I don't know. But if you are addicted, you got to have a recovery plan, because that's what our people are in need of now.
So you took students to see Birth of a Nation. Can you explain why you did that? and the importance of that film. You know, it's really unfortunate, and I'm not hating on Tyler Perry that, you know, he beat out Nate Parker that weekend in the box office. I'm not hating on Tyler Perry, but I would have hoped that more people would have went to go see Birth of a Nation, not just because of the movie, but because Nate Parker said, listen, I am not going to do anything else until I become, you know, Nat Turner. Period. And he went out and got the money for it. He actually won Sundance. I mean, he did the work for the movie. And so why was it important for you to show your students or show your students that movie?
So there were a number of reasons. The most important, which, or at least my own personal reason, I'll save for the end. But one of the most important things was that it's so rare. And now, you know, in the era of Black Panther, it's one thing, you know, Luke Cage is another thing. It is so rare to see Black people assume cultural or any type of power when we're fighting structures that look like slavery, right? When we're fighting white supremacy. It is so important for Black children in particular. And if you look at the research between racial identity and academic success, you'll see this repeated over and over again. It is so important that Black children have images that are going to affirm for them, one, their right to their humanity, and two, the agency that African descendant people took when we were in chains. A lot of times we're taught that slavery was, you know, we sang spirituals and ate watermelon and shucked and jived our way through it, you know, without realizing that the maroon villages that existed, the resistance movements that existed, the rebellions that many newspapers wouldn't even report on because they didn't want to tell others, they didn't want other enslaved Africans to know about. It is vitally important that we shift the narrative about what resistance looked like during slavery. For me, and, you know, even with the Tyler Perry, I'd forgotten Tyler Perry was out that same year, or that same weekend. And, you know, we have to remember that genres matter. And so a Tyler Perry film is always going to do well with a large portion of our population, and we can, you know, save why for, I guess, later discussion. So I don't think there should be a pitting up against something because they both stand on their own feet. But I will say that it is important to know that even though Birth of a Nation went through its own troubles after it was rolled out, as far as independent films go, they made back the entirety of their budget with that film. And even though it didn't end up being the super blockbuster that people anticipated it being after Sundance, they made all their money back plus that much more. So the success of the film, depending on what measure, is certainly something that I think we should tease out a bit more. But that film, and I'm assuming you guys have seen it, but it dealt with so many issues that as an educator, I'm taking off my lawyer hat and putting on my educator hat, it opened up so many doors for me to be able to communicate with my students, with students that we work with in schools across the country, to be able to have conversation and dialogue that we simply weren't having prior to that. And it was important for me to be able to help contribute to that. And so some of the students that we had taken, we actually even trained their teachers on how to deal with issues of race in the classroom, how to create culturally competent curriculum, how to create a curriculum that's designed to meet children's needs, specific cultural needs, because the learning needs that Black children have, quite frankly, are different than the learning needs of white children. And so that movie really gave us an opportunity. It opened up a lot. And, you know, full disclosure, I know Nate Parker. We were, you know, I've known him for years and years and years, have done a lot of work with him in the past with youth programs. I've been doing youth programs with him since the early 2000s, I want to say. So I'd already had a history of seeing his work and using it and creating curriculum around the movies he had put out to further educate Black children. So this was, for me, this was nothing out of the ordinary. I was really happy that we were able to do that.
Before we let you go, I mean, can you do me one favor? Can you address our white brothers and sisters, as you would put it? I like the way you articulate it that way. In the way of letting them understand that this is important to us, because what we get and what I think some white people do is they continuously say slavery was such a long time ago, and you guys continue to talk about it. It's over with. Everybody's not a racist, and so forth and so on. And I don't know if they're all sympathetic to the things that we go through, especially, you know, because it's still modern day. It's just in a different form. But I don't think that they really see that. So the white people who don't understand that this still is an issue for us, can you articulate why this is still an issue for us?
I could try. I think it's important to know first that Black people didn't all get in a room and close the door and decide, you know what? We're going to have some of the most jacked up communities. We're going to go to the worst schools. We're going to have access to the worst jobs ever. And then we're just going to blame it on white people. Like, we didn't decide to do that. That's not how these things happen. All of the negative outcomes that we are seeing from African descendant communities today are directly traceable to systems of oppression and racism that were put into place when they were making decisions like how many blacks would count as a full person versus wouldn't in a 3/5 compromise. We're going back even to the early 1600s when the first Africans were brought here. And I think sometimes we do our white brothers and sisters a disservice by saying that they don't, or by accepting the excuse that they honestly believe that slavery no longer exists. And we know that they don't actually believe that because, as Jane Elliott, who is the white scholar who studied that, she did the blue-eye, brown-eye test. As she says, there's not a white person in the world today who would honestly and realistically agree to trade places with a black person for the rest of their life. And we know that they wouldn't do that because when you ask them, they wouldn't. Like, she'd actually done this whole workshop where she'd looked at that question. And they wouldn't trade places with us for life because they know that there are things that we don't have access to as black people that they do as white people. They know and we know that there are privileges and benefits that they have as white people that we don't have access to as black people. So I think they are aware that racism still exists because they would never want to be black. And because of that, we sort of have to raise the bar of discourse and no longer give room for arguments and discussion that really don't have basis in either fact or lived experience. And I think that would be one of them. They know good and well they're not trying to be black. It would not, if you don't want your child to marry a black person because of certain things, that's because racism exists. These things don't come from nowhere. So I think they are aware of it. They may not want to admit it, but that's a discomfort that they're going to have to create solutions to because we certainly aren't going to wait.
And for our listeners, if you've never seen Dr. Joy DeGruy and the post-traumatic slave syndrome, that's something you definitely should watch. Because you dropped that. Thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Maynard.
Well, just to kind of add in, we don't have to even discuss slavery. Certainly, slavery ended, but apartheid on this continent continues to this day in many ways. Sure. We know that there were black covenants in mortgages that were written for all of the, from 1901 through, through the late 40s, 50s, and 60s in Chicago and other places, and how Chicago became so segregated. In addition to, just the idea of, white water fountains, black water fountains, white and black bathrooms, white and black schools. There were schools in Mississippi, I believe it still is, where they never, in fact, addressed the desegregation order properly.
Right.
They never, 60, 70 years after Brown versus Board of Education, 60 years, this has not been 70 years. They still were like, nah, we're good. We're gonna keep this segregation going.
And we can bring it even closer because the housing foreclosure crisis that took place in 2007, 6, 7, 8, and so on, which actually is still going on for black communities, those were literally racist loans. You have banks today that are paying settlements still today for giving black people who are creditworthy, had the proper income, giving them literally loans that can only be classified as racist. That if it didn't matter what their credit score was, it didn't matter what their income was. If you were a black person buying a house in a black community and you went to certain banks like Wells Fargo, you were going to get higher interest rates on your loan than would a similarly situated white person. So
I'm sorry. Wait. I'm sorry. Did you say Dan Gilbert?
Whoa.
Okay, I did. I said it.
Okay.
I said it.
Okay.
She said what? She said Wells Fargo, but I said Dan Gilbert. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Back off. Go ahead, man.
Okay.
No. So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the time in the podcast that our feature, whenever we have a guest, we put them on the hot seat and we need to get them top 5 MCs. We need to know their hip hop knowledge. So, Lurie.
Yes.
I told you this was coming.
You did.
I gave you fair warning. And trust me, if you don't have a hard top 5, we're going to talk bad about you.
I don't know how hard it is. I was a church girl who wasn't allowed to listen to none of this until I got to college. So I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there. But I do have my top 5.
Uh-oh. And based on
what
how...
college is this? What college is this? That'll determine the top 5.
No, it really won't. I went to Penn State.
So Will Smith is going to be in her top 5, Lamont. Will Smith is going to be in her top 5.
Wait. Let's be careful because I think she said she was in Brooklyn. So I know she's going to do the right thing. She's going to do the right thing. I got some faith.
So I would say my top 5. I'm going to first say Miss Lauryn Hill, Miss Education of Lauryn Hill. Her song Mystery of Iniquity, that still remains one of the top, most amazing, beautiful songs ever. I also put Talib Kweli for 2 albums, Quality and Beautiful Struggle. And on Quality is Get By, and on Beautiful Struggle is Black Girl Pain. Those are like the best. I'm also going to add Tribe Called Quest, Low End Theory, because Excursions off that album always, for me, typifies it is. I'm going to put Jadena on that album, The Chief. He may not be known to as many people, but he is somewhat of a newer artist. He's on Janelle Monáe's. I think he's on Janelle Monáe's. And I love that brother. And my son is totally into him right now. And I can actually let him listen to most of what he says and not have to screen it. So that's great. And then this is actually a new addition for me, even though I am in New York, because I did not always like this particular artist. But I like where he's going. And I'm going to say Jay-Z, 444. He's not always been, I've actually protested him for years. What? But I really appreciate, Big Pimp, I just, as my womanhood just could not, I'm just sorry, it just, no. He was not in the R. Kelly category of music I cannot dance to, but he certainly, was too much of a challenge for me to ever have close to my top 5. But this latest album, I feel like has done similar to me what Birth of a Nation did. It created an entire education curriculum platform that made it so much easier to talk to Black students about some serious topics. So I appreciate him for that, so he's now on my top 5.
That's a hard top 5, fellas. I mean, or anything that we want to take off? Anything we want to yell at her about?
I want to take off 1 through 4.
What?
Can we take those out and start over? Hater.
No, sir.
Just a hater.
No, you know what? Here's another one of my issues. I think although Jadena, I think he's dope, but I don't know if we can put him in the MC category. And I think we have to refine this. It's like he's too new. He's like bread that's still baking in the oven. You know what I mean?
He is new, but he has been able to do lyrically. He's been able to introduce a thread of Pan-Africanism to a Black American audience lyrically that I don't think we have actually had a lot of access to. And I think that's really important.
Well, you brought up a word that we can't get into tonight, but I'm going to need you to come back and have a conversation about the Prince of Pan-Africanism at some time in the future.
Oh my!
We're not going to go there, but
no, sir.
I want to know. I want you to let everyone know how they can find out more about the book, your work, and the things that are near and dear to your heart. Go.
Sure. Afro State of Mind is my handle everywhere. AfroStateOfMind.com is my website. If you are looking for legal assistance, we are only in the state of New York at the Center for Law and Social Justice. So sometimes I do the Karen Hunter Show or other shows, and people start calling. I'm like, we can't help you in Minnesota, but we can help you right here. But if you're looking for legal discussion, clsj.org is my organization's website. But yeah, those are the 2 places I occupy the most. So, yeah.
Thank you so very much, Lurie. This was fantastic. Thank you so very much for dropping the jewels on pretty much everything that Black folks need to know, and white folks too. And white folks need to know too, because that's important. You're important too, white folks. You're important too, white folks.
But and don't be mad if Jefferson Beauregard sends you a letter.
Y'all leave Jefferson alone.
Letter.
Thank you so very much, Lurie. We truly appreciate it. Also, Sunday Civics every Sunday. You guys are on at 10 o'clock?
That's right. 10 o'clock. You can hear us on Sirius XM, channel 126, or visit SundayCivics.com to download the podcast. Definitely doing our best to keep our community as engaged as possible. Let's hold these folks accountable and get some resources.
I think we would be a good second up, a runner up right after them, like at 12 or so. I know that who's on after you guys? The Momentum.
Right, and then there's Next Nation with Cousin Sil. Yeah, it's a good lineup.
Okay. We need to get in there somewhere. We need to get ourselves in there. Thank you so much again, Lurie.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
You do the same. Thank you.
Okay, she's gone.
She's out of there.
Yo, she talks fast as fuck.
Yeah, she was dope though.
Yeah, I thought it was a good interview. That was decent. I was surprised.
Surprised.
She was a lot of fun.
At her?
I just didn't know what was going to happen because, you know what I'm saying, she's away from the clique. I've only had like 2 drive-by conversations with her, so I didn't know what we were going to get into, and I was very